Okay, welcome to my talk. It's so much great stuff going on today. My name is Stian Håklev, and I'm going to tell you what happens when you give a dev team Claude Code for a day. And turns out that opens a lot of interesting, hopefully, insights and thoughts. So just before we get to the dev team, who here have built a tool just because they wanted to scratch an itch lately? Who've built several? Right? This is a pretty common, I think, experience, especially among the people who code to these kind of conferences, which obviously aren't fully representative of all the developers in the world. We have to keep that in mind. So I'm not going to talk about, all of these things, right? There's tons of talks about Claude Code. You guys, I think, are pretty well aware of what's going on. So let's talk about tools and tools building. So I've been programming for, I started in primary school. And all along being able to program, even being able to be good with computers, right? Going into MS-DOS and stuff gives you these superpowers. But it also lets you see the world in a different lens. You see everything as problems that could be solved or could be more efficient. And there's this famous adage about the lazy developers, right? How it's kind of good to be a lazy developer because instead of spending 5 hours doing manual work, you'll be happier spending 5 hours automating it. Sometimes, there's compounding benefits because you actually end up doing that more time. Sometimes it's just that you had more interesting time. And sometimes you spend a week, optimizing that 5-hour sequence. And that's a rabbit hole. Although, of course, as we know, the balance and the speed has shifted radically. So I've been building stuff all along, Apple Script, Keyboard Maestro, little APIs, having a little VM. And now, and especially since New Year's. I mean, I've been working with ChatGPT at our company with integrating APIs for the last four or 5 years. But it's really since New Year's that things changed. And suddenly I could go home after a long day at work and I still had energy to tell Claude to just try something. And then something came into something else. So I started building a lot of tools. And so I've had a few really interesting opportunities. I'm a developer as a day job. I'll show you our product later. But I've had a few opportunities to go into other companies, and actually a few places I've spent a full day with a team of maybe 20 developers, even a few other people, designers, office managers. And so it's really interesting to think about what you do during a day to really level up and to really change the way a team works with agentic coding. And so the way we structure these days, I had a 1-hour lecture in the morning, was kind of like introduction to Claude Code. Here's how you set it up. Here are the do's and don'ts, especially for just getting started on a side project. Here's all the things that I've learned the hard way about what is it that stops it from degenerating into spaghetti code very quickly. Here are some interesting skills and tools I'll show you that I've developed that you can use. And then the idea was the whole day was vibe coding. We wanted these people, and these people were typically people who have been using Copilot, they've been using Cursor, different things, but they hadn't really gone full, maybe 1 or 2 people. Most people hadn't gone full down kind of really agentic development that is now becoming more common, right? And then I'd give another lecture at lunch, which was either about how do you build AI APIs into your product that you're building, or how do you use this in a team professional setting, which we'll get back to. So it's really interesting to get a chance a few months later to follow up with some of these teams and kind of what stuck, what was the thing that shifted, and what does that tell us about how we can get the developers more productive and maybe other things as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tools I've built. There's a reason for this. So I'm not a designer. I know what I like, but I have no way of specifying it up front. If I want to make an app, I can say, well, I like this more than that, but I could never tell you, well, I'm going to have it this and that way, right? And so as I was struggling with, and of course, Claude Code will throw up something that's okay out of the box. So already it's better than what I could do by hand, but it's very generic. Doesn't inspire joy. And I thought about this idea of binary search, which is one of these programming concepts that is super, super powerful in so many different settings. And I thought, okay, I know what I like. What I need is a really broad sample, right? With binary search, we don't start near the middle. We go for the extremes. We say, is it above or below 50? So below or above 25, right? So I just asked Claude, hey, here's my website's already there. I already have real data. So here's the shift. Before, I kept iterating on the actual app. And it was able to do that, but of course it takes a lot of time. There's like all these JSX files and tests and it has to deploy and stuff. So I said, okay, I don't want you to write code. I want you to make a static mockup as HTML. So not interactive, I can't click on anything. Use the real data from the app and also go as diverse as possible. And there could be two things, right? I could be iterating on the aesthetics, or I could be iterating on the UX and the functionality. And I've used it for both. So I just told Claude Code this. This was actually a private app I was working on. That I wanted it to be something more than just the plain Claude Code, right? And it just spun up. So okay, so you're doing a read later app, and you're interested in I gave it like Renaissance, Da Vinci, manuscripts, and it threw up, and it took the data that I already had. So this is not lorem ipsum, and this is the actual stuff that it output like a few months ago. And it gave me quite different versions, both visually and a little bit UX variations. And so just looking through this, I was like, well, I kind of like that one. I kind of like that one too. Those are totally different, but I like both of them, but I don't like these other ones. So I could go back to Claude and I say, hey, I like 1 and 5, and it would spin again and it would iterate again. And pretty quickly, I had something that I was super happy with. So I thought, that's useful. Hey, Claude, make a skill. Take that whole conversation that we just had back and forth and make a skill. So next time I just say design review, boom, you do it, right? So I used that a few times. This is useful. Then I started thinking, it's wasting a lot of tokens building this whole HTML harness. Also, because we get greedy in these in these Claude Code days, I want to be able to vote. I want to be able to do live voice input. So I said to Claude, hey, look, we've got this skill. Here's some examples of how we used it. I want to build a harness that has the HTML, so we don't have to recreate that. We can just make the snippets. Here's a project where we have voice input. Just go copy that. Here's something there, and just make it easy for me to copy. And boom, I have design review, which is still a skill. It's just backed with a little bit of code, a few HTML and CSS files. I imported some CSS frameworks, so it wouldn't have to, trying to optimize it. So basically, I'm trying. It's LLM UX, right? I'm trying to optimize, make the Claude's job easier. And this has been incredibly useful, mostly for my private projects, but I've used it at work as well. Sometimes, the designer is busy, and so you're kind of like, hey, I need to implement this thing, but and they're like, yeah, tomorrow I'll sketch it out for you. And so what I did is I just said, hey, look at our code base. You know all the components, you know all the data. You know the problem we're trying to solve. Give me 4 different versions with exactly the same components, the same design language, everything. And I just showed those to the designer. And I said, look, I'm not trying to take your job. I'm not a designer, but we need to ship this. He said, version 3 is fine. And so I'd saved, 24 hours of the boss waiting for this thing to be built. But the key point here is the reason I developed it was 2 things. First, because I was playing with side projects, and 2, because of this habit of seeing problems, iterating on them. Another cool tool, I use Claude a lot, and at this point I had 3.8 gigabytes of Claude conversations. And the cool thing about Claude is every conversation is stored, including the tool calls, every single thing. So 3.8 gigabytes of text, that's a lot of text, that's a lot of tokens. But of course, a lot of it is the same file read in 10,000 times, right? What my problem was, I could never find the really interesting conversations I had before, especially because I used a lot of different folders. I had multiple checkouts and stuff. So I said, okay, hey, Claude, I need to index all my Claude chats. I don't understand why they don't offer this as a default. But anyway, so it's like it looked at what was existing. It's like, hey, let's just build something ourselves. Sure. Get some semantic embeddings in a database. I don't care. Just build it. It built it. It started running. It was amazing. It's a skill. I just said, hey, use chat search to find when we had that conversation 2 weeks ago about that thing. It's like, yeah, here it is. Okay, now I know how to do this other thing. Perfect. And then after I'd been using it a while, I realized, Claude, it looks like you're clumsy with using this tool, because I see you calling it, I see you getting error messages because you misformatted the thing, I see the tool is crashing, I see you have to call it multiple times. Use the tool to find all the times when you use this skill, analyze what went wrong, improve the tool. And it, of course, happily did so. And it's like, oh, I see. Well, we have this SQLite lock problem. I'm going to fix that. And we have, this token thing, and the instructions were not clear enough. Great. Now I have a tool that works really reliably, and it's just humming in the background. It's just part of my tool set. So it's this iteration, right, of seeing a problem, chatting with Claude interactively, and trying to solve it, capturing that as usually a skill. Could also be just like write it down in a markdown file or something. Maybe then making it more solid, making everything observable and logged, not just production code, but also developer tooling. This is really important. And iterating, letting Claude iterate, right? So there's some very powerful mindset here, I think. Right? One example also, I was building a lot of different side projects that all needed some similar things. They needed, for example, semantic embeddings and clustering and deduplication and stuff like that. And so I said, hey, go look at all these different side projects. I feel like I've built the same thing 5 times. Is there something that you can extract? And it's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, I need a cool name, Limbic, because it's like brainy. And so it built out this whole Python library with tons of tests and stuff. And then I found Karpathy had this auto research thing, which is basically like if you set up the right constraints, you can have Claude Code or any other LLM just iterate in a kind of a smart way. So again, it's like binary search and similar algorithms, right, to optimize something where there's a clear reward function. And I'm like, well, I have all these tools using these algorithms. I have a lot of test data. I have a lot of like actual things that you can build test sets for. Now use a ton of tokens over the weekend and iterate. And it's like, okay, now I have this deduplication thing that is like super optimized for the kind of stuff you're working on. And anytime I go into a new project, I say, hey, use Limbic. Of course, that's full documentation, and I haven't touched a code of it, a line of it, but it's building the tool set, right? Like a carpenter who's like, I need a hammer that works just so, I'm gonna build it myself. And it's not just about building dev tools. It's also, for me, about solving problems in my life or just exploring cool things. So here are a few different things that I worked on. I was frustrated that I wanted to know what was going on in the world, and I would go to Aftenposten, I would go to The Guardian, and I'd go to Twitter and read about Zoran Mamdani, and I was like, there must be more to it than this, right? So I have now an agent that every night searches through the web, uses a lot of Limbic, of course, all those algorithms, and a bit of tuning to try to find really interesting takes from all around the world. If it's in a language I don't understand, it translates it. So I can read about Lebanese war from an Iranian newspaper, from a Hebrew newspaper, from an Arabic newspaper, which is amazing to wake up to. And of course, I'm super happy about the design, which was I used design review, and it matters, right? This kind of delight, this kind of feeling like this is something I made. This one I launched yesterday. It's a new event site for my city, Hamar. Again, lots of codecs pulling in events from all kinds of places, design review, trying to make it much more attractive. Little spelling program for my son, who's really smart but struggling with spelling. So super easy. But the fun thing is when he's using it and he's like, oh, for example, so I've built a lot of learning tools for myself, which we'll get to, and I have kind of high conscientiousness when it comes to learning. So I'm more worried about not marking a mistake than marking it, because if I don't mark it, I might not see that word again. So I'm like, oh no, I need to go back and make sure that I mark it. Whereas for him, when he gets a mistake, he's like, go on, right? And I'm like, no, you need to stop and look at the right thing. So I'm like, okay, wait, give me 5 minutes. Hey, Claude, every time he gets the word wrong, put up a thing where he has to type the word verbatim, otherwise he can't continue. Bird. Okay, hey, Jens, now you can continue. Look, his learning rate's going up the roof, right? Analysis of all the local programs of a political party in Norway and seeing how they overlap and finding the most unique political suggestions. The NRK TV archive, they have 10,000 programs that are super hidden. What if we made them super accessible? So these are obviously based on my personal interests, right? You would make totally different things. But the thing is, building these, I had to learn a lot of new skills, and I had to also kind of, we'll go into 2 of these. So I'm really interested in learning history. I love reading books, but I often feel that I forget everything. And then I also have a very patchy understanding. So I know a little bit about this, a little bit about that. Don't quite know what I don't know. So Petrarca, that's actually the thing that started as a read later app. It kind of became something else. So there's a lot more aspects to it. But one of the cool things is if I'm walking through the forest near my home, I can open this app, and it gives me a prompt. It says, hey, what do you know about Plato? It's a very open-ended question. So I wouldn't want to type, but if I'm walking in the forest, I can speak. I can say, well, it's Plato. Okay, so he lived then. He was the student of Socrates. Something about the cave, something about forms. I wonder how much we really know about how much do we really know about how different it was from Socrates if everything from Socrates was written by Plato? And were there a lot of people at the same time who thought the same things, or was it really unique? Okay, just, nice little 10-minute walk. And then it processes this against a kind of a knowledge tree that I've extracted from all kinds of places. And it not only updates and shows you the main gaps that, of course, it has methods to teach you later, but it identifies your wonderings and it sends out an agent. And when I come back and I have 5 minutes waiting in the car, here's what we know about Plato and Socrates, right? So I'm trying to wean myself off Twitter. I'm like, how can I use those 5 minutes in the car more productively? And how can I still, sit there with a book in the evening without letting the analog go in? So I think, these two habits, right? The one thing is constantly seeing, all the slides will be public afterwards, by the way, but feel free to take pictures. All the frictions, all the possibilities for being lazy, how can we iterate, right? Do something quick, and then notice how you use it, track it, make it observable, iterate on it, make it better, and then try to build a lot of stuff personally, if you have time. I mean, everyone's situation is different, but for me, the difference between writing a prompt after work and letting it work, that I have energy for. I had lots of projects I wanted to do a year ago, and I just couldn't find myself, writing it by hand, right? So agency, right? You stop accepting your environment as given. The range, I have built my first iPhone apps. I've never built iPhone apps before. I mean Claude, but I was along in the process. I learned something. I've built an Apple TV app, which is really cool. You can build VR apps. I've done semantic clustering. I've trained algorithms. I've done OCR. I've done voice recognition, right? And these are skills that are useful also in your day job. So here's a project I think is really cool. It's probably feels very niche to you, but that's kind of the point, right? Is that the thing that you build would be very niche to me. So I love learning languages. I speak a bunch of them. I've been learning languages for 25 years, and I've been thinking about how to better learn languages. And I'm thinking, oh man, I wish that there were these kind of textbooks or these kind of resources. I wish someone would make, obviously this is the best way of learning. And mostly they didn't. And so for some random reason in February, I decided to learn Arabic. And which is, I didn't even know the alphabet. So starting from scratch, and I started in Duolingo because like it was there and they had the pronunciation and stuff. And I've been frustrated by Duolingo before and, and thinking, there must be something better. And this time after a week, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm building my own Duolingo for me, right? I'm not trying, and this is the thing, it's so liberating as well for someone who works in a product company where we're constantly trying to think about what our customers want, to think about, I don't care about anyone else. What do I want? So it turns out, and here's an important thing, right? So this is the actual prompt from 8th of February, 2026, from my logs. So I said, hey, Claude, and I had no idea where it was, well, I had ideas, I had loose ideas, but I didn't know what was out there. I didn't know how hard it would be. So instead of just saying, hey, build me an app that teaches me Arabic, I said, I'm gonna make an app to learn Arabic. I first need you to do extensive research using subagents, storing information in Markdown files, about all open source technologies, free APIs, and open data sets that can help us. And of course, Claude says 40 subagents are currently working, right? And I did a few other prompts as well, including reading all academic information about language learning in general, spaced repetition, what are unique features of Arabic. There are quite a few. It's a fun language. And then, based on that, I could build the thing that I was interested in, and I could iterate. And the thing I was interested in, this is the app, was I'd never want to see an isolated word. I want to see full sentences. But those sentences had to be constructed in the kind of Goldilocks, perfect difficulty, perfect easiness level, right? Either it's all words you know, but some of them you need to repeat, or maybe it's one word that you don't know, and it turns out this is not easy. So building the app itself, I mean, it was super easy, right? Maybe I had to tweak the design a little bit, but that was basically one shot. I've almost never had a bug in it. That's not the hard thing. The hard thing is the pipeline that takes in all of these learning signals. And the cool thing, by the way, if I read this sentence now, you can see I can click a word to see the translation, but I also usually just show translation. I get the full translation and I check. And again, this wouldn't work on my son, right? My son would need a Duolingo interface where you have to prove that you know it. But I trust myself, so I self-report. But the thing is, if I now went to the next card, I would mark this one word message as not known, but every other word as known. So in a single sentence, you've now sent 8 to 10 learning signals, which means over a day, you're generating 1,000 learning signals. That's updating a learner model, which means that even with an N of 1, you're getting really rich data. And then the crucial question is, okay, well, how do you use that data to optimize the coverage, the memory and so on? And there have been many rounds of iteration here. Actually, because it turns out maybe in a few years you can just go, Fable 5.0, and you say, hey, here's my learning history for the last 3 months, generate 10 perfect sentences. We're far from there today, right? So there's a whole pipeline with lots of mechanics, statistics, selection, lemmatization, because you need to take a word that's conjugated and you need to find its base form. And then you give it to an AI with a certain prompt, and then you need to test it, and crazy, but it works. And when it works, it's freaking amazing. And then, of course, like with every tool I do, it's every single click I make is fully recorded. And I'm not going to look at that data, but Claude sure as hell is. So regularly I say, hey, Claude, look at the last few weeks' data. And of course, all of the experiments, all of the analysis it's done before, it's also written down in index, so it has easy access to that. And it says, okay, I'm seeing, we need to tweak this a little bit, right? And this, because I'm the single user, the app now probably looks different than when I started, because now I know 2,259 words. I have used it for 122 days without missing a single day. And I'm now reading children's books. I'm watching TikTok videos from Syria. I'm started reading the Quran. It's really fun. I've started experiments with generating a podcast using speech to text, which is perfectly tuned to my level of understanding. And as you know, if you listen to a language that you don't know, even detecting where a word starts and where a word stops is really hard, right? So I played with different things like inserting commas between each word to force it to do a little stop. But actually what worked in the end was I'm not sending a single prompt to 11 labs. I'm sending a few hundred, because it breaks up every single sentence with English, with slow, with fast, and it has a full script that is basically similar to what, if you bought a language learning course like Lingua. I don't know, it's fun stuff. Sorry, this is not a talk about language learning, but it is fun stuff, I think. So what can we learn from this, other than Arabic, which is highly recommended? This is ridiculously specific. It's kind of super over-engineered. Like the amount of work that it does, the amount of insane features are like, if you went to Duolingo and pitched this to your boss, they would just laugh at you. They're like, we're never going to build this. And it's also very focused on me. I think my hunch is that if a lot of people are able to make these hyper-personalized, over-engineered apps, over time, we're going to find that I'm probably not the only one in the world who loves this thing. Not all language learners, but there might be a few thousand out there who are like, oh my God, this is the perfect thing. And in fact, now, this side project is hard to serve because it's not just built by AI, it uses AI. So if you want to use it, you'd have to pay me, just because the AI is not free. It's not super expensive, it's not free. And then, that's the whole rigmarole. But it's on GitHub, and I have several people who were like, hey, Claude, I want to learn French. Look at this thing. And it worked for half an hour, and since then he's been learning French. So, and tuning it according to his needs, right? But the thing is, what kind of new interfaces and algorithms and ways of interacting with the world and with data can we find if people go really deep? And I think that's super exciting. Coming back to the developers, right? So the developers were really fun. As I said, most of them had only used things like Copilot, Cursor, maybe automated code review. Because they were primed to say, go crazy, build ambitious side projects. Don't worry about everything that has to be, enterprise yet. We're going to get there, but don't worry about that yet. And by the way, here's kind of a smorgasbord of really cool tools that you can start playing with, even just simple things like, let Claude interview you, use voice to talk for 10 minutes, and then, send out research agents to read. Like, there's so much HCI research, right? There are conferences where people are presenting novel interfaces. Like, now we can have Claude read those articles and implement it for us. So like some of those things, and that's kind of what stuck. So this different way of working agentically was a real mind shift. And working on the side project is what kind of cemented it. It's what made them experience it. And then they kept working on those on evenings. Most of them got like a Claude Max subscription for at least a month to test it out. And so they would keep working on it. And then gradually they were bringing in a lot of these workflows into the work. And of course, it's different because one group were consultants, so they were really limited by whatever customer they're working with and the permissions. Another was a product company, so they had more autonomy there. But this way of working, I think, was a real unlock for them. And they're building their own tools, they're building their own skills, they're sharing their own skills, they're making everything observable, not just the customer product. We're used to putting metrics and analytics in our customer-facing products, but all of your dev tooling should be observable and we should keep iterating on it, right? And then what's interesting is I mentioned in each of these teams there were a few people who weren't really developers. There might have been designers, there might have been user support, or even office managers. They got to play around with Claude as well. And it turns out that they have needs that are not met. So there is this real trend now, and this is really interesting, where the office manager is like, hey, I need to interview all these people. Usually I do this whole manual work. Can I do that? Can I optimize that? Can I have Claude, analyze the transcript? Can I have Claude research the candidates? Can I have, and the cool thing that I hadn't thought of, because I'm not an office manager, she didn't want so much the tool to analyze the candidate, because like they're hiring this person, it's a huge decision and they have a big process for that. But they had a script for the interview and they wanted Claude to analyze the interview to rate the interviewer. To what extent are you actually following all of our guidelines and stuff like that so that we can become better? I was like, I have never thought about that. It's awesome that you can build that for yourself. And so I guess for most of us who are here, when we hear this, we're like, okay, well, what are we doing then, right? Everyone can build their own tools. And I think what we're doing is going to change. And I think it's hard to say exactly in what direction. But one thing that's certain, it's very easy to throw up a vibe-coded tool that runs locally that does something for you. And I encourage everyone who hasn't tried to try it, including non-coders. It's a whole different story to make something that works for a team, that's collaborative, that's secure, that's backed up, that will actually last over time. And so there's two answers to that, right? One answer is, well, we still have a job. Another answer is maybe part of our job is to make that easier. So if Aleph, which is my Arabic learning app, breaks, that sucks for me. I might break my streak, but it's okay. I can fix it, right? It's no biggie. But at my day job, I'm still using Claude Code and Codex and others to write code. I haven't written manual code for at least 9 months. But the big difference to me and why I call one vibe coding and the other one not is at work, I read all the code. I am responsible for all the code. So transitioning to the day job, right? In the day job, we're making a product that has thousands of customers who are paying us, who are entrusting us with very valuable information, very sensitive information, and they don't want people outside the company to know it. They might not know. They might not want certain people inside the company to know certain things. And so I can use all the AI I want within secure boundaries. We heard about, tool. There's all kinds of things you should think about. But in the end, I sign off on the code. I read it. I understand it. My colleague who has to review it reads it, understands it, tests it. In the end, I can never blame Claude. In the end, it is me, it is my colleague. And when I review someone else's code, it's the same thing. Now, of course, we now write a lot more code. and a lot more ambitious code. And so suddenly you're getting all these PR reviews that are 50 files touched, huge features, ambitious things that maybe you haven't worked deeply on. And there's a few different developers who have coined this idea of understanding debt. And it's a play on tech debt that you accrue over time. And just like tech debt, my take is we shouldn't avoid it completely, right? At least if you're not if you're a startup, if you're NASA maybe, but if you're a startup, you take on debt, right? To be ambitious. If you don't have debt, you're kind of dead. But it's about the balance. Same thing for understanding that. So as the product is moving very quickly, how can we make sure that we're still in the driver's seat? And again, luckily, AI can help us, but only if used in a very careful way. It's not, I mean, we still have to think really hard, which I guess is a good thing for now. But here's one fun thing where I took this mentality of trying to solve problems. So let's say you get this huge PR, and in this case, this is a PR for my private project, which I actually have never read before, but I don't want to show you my company's code. Here's a huge PR with a complex algorithm that affects a lot of different moving parts, and there's timing issues, there's back end, front end, and you're like, looks good, I don't know. The problem then is when you go to GitHub and you review the files, and you're like, here's 50 files, right? Half of them are you renamed some variables, you moved some imports around. The other one is like, this thing is going to break everything if you merge it. So the first thing I did, again, hey, Claude, I have this PR. Of course, we can run all the testing and automated bug fixing and stuff. That's fine, we do that. But in the end, as I said, I still need to understand it. That's a different problem from asking Claude to review my code. So, okay, for very complex PRs, most PRs are fine, but for complex PRs, I would ask Claude, hey, I want you to do an amazing write-up. Like, go really deep, make an HTML page, super beautiful, diagrams, tables, just like teach me this PR. And Claude Opus 4.6, I go to work, a few minutes later, I mean, it's amazing. And that was really cool. So of course, now it's a skill, right? I used that for a while. And yet there's a friction because I read that thing, I feel like, okay, I'm kind of following now. Then I go to the GitHub PR review and there's the 40 files. And I don't even know where to start. And I still, again, have to read the actual code. I can't trust what Claude tells me. It can help me, but I can't trust it. So, and I'm not the only one who has built something like this. I'm not going to say that. But I built a code review, and the link to this is on the website afterwards, if anyone's interested. Basically, what it does is it combines a code walkthrough with the actual review. So all of the changes are in the narrative, and I think I have to reload to get this thing to work. So this is, again, from my Arabic thing, so it's doing something funky around morphology. And so here we get the nice, narrative introduction, right? Imagine that this is coming from a colleague, and I have no idea what they're working on. So I need to kind of, okay, what are we even trying to solve here? What are the constraints? What are the problems? We get some nice diagrams. Here's the architecture. We get some review tips. And then we go to section 1. And so it starts by prioritizing what's the kind of the cornerstone. What's the thing that is the most risky, the most important? And then we get some information about that. And then we get the actual code, right? So this is the code with some comments. And I can say, yeah, looks good to me. I keep going. Here's the code. So this syncs with GitHub, so it gets all the review comments. You can leave review comments here. Like, this is an actual replacement of the GitHub review panel, right? Which I don't understand why GitHub isn't more ambitious about this, but that's a different story. And so once you've read, and then at the end of this, there's like, oh, there's 10 more files. They're all renaming. You can expand it, and you'll see it in line. But trust me, like, that's not the thing that you're worried about, right? And so basically, you read through this narrative, you're done. You can say yes. If everything made sense and all of that stuff, you can actually say, yes, I understand this code. I've read it. I trust it. Or you can, identify places. So to me, this is a fun example of how this kind of tool building perspective, both building private projects, building developer tools, and also this incremental, I have an itch, talk to Claude, make a skill, this is now, of course, a skill backed by an app, because this is a harness that has all of this cool stuff built in, and so on and so on. And I can also export it. So I can export this to a static HTML file, and I can send it. So or sometimes if I do a really hard PR, I'll review it myself here, because of course I didn't write the code. And then if I'm super happy with it, I'll export this and send it to as part of the payload of the review. And just like with Aleph, I started this by saying, hey, I know there's an amazing Kai conference on design. I've been there. I know that they almost every year have interesting papers about novel interfaces for code review, for how do you understand code, for how do you edit code and all that stuff. Go read those papers. And also find all the open source libraries for rendering diffs, for do all that research and come back to me, and then we'll design it together and we'll iterate. So it's a super powerful workflow. But in the end, as I said, the tools are there to help us. At my day job, I'm still the one who's responsible. Now, we've talked about building tools, scratching itches, building workflows that work for you and for your team. And we've also said that, Claude Code isn't so accessible for everyone, even though they're trying to do things like co-work. Having everyone install OpenClaw pays for lots of nice workshops, but is probably not the world that we really want to go to, especially not with our work colleagues. So if you want like a team to work together using all of this AI to set up really powerful workflows, agents, MCPs, skills, etc. But you've also heard the talk this morning about the risk of prompt injection, about the incredible amount of, and what he called it is a weakness. It's not, I forgot the other word, but basically it's not something that you can just patch. It's not something, oh, I found this thing, I patched it, it's good. It's a systematic weakness. We will probably never be able to get an LLM that we can 100% trust. So that's my day job. And this is not a sales pitch at all, but it's a really cool product. And I do think it fits in really nice in the story. So I'm building Tana. This is a company that has an office just a few hundred meters. We actually had an offsite in this building once. And it is, it stores your information. It lets you act agentically on it. And it was kind of cool because a few days ago we were in Aftenposten. And they actually, so this video, I'm just going to quickly show you this, and then I'll show you why this is an attempt at answering some of those questions. So first of all, we believe that in 5 years, people will still be having meetings. We think a lot of things about workplaces will change, but we think people will still need to sync, to build culture, to make decisions, right? To steer. And we want those meetings to be as efficient as possible. So how can we gather as much information before the meeting, during the meeting, be able to make decisions, archive them, query previous information during the meeting, and then after, right? So this is just a quick conversation between, I think this is an Aftenposten journalist, and this is one of our customers, actually.
Hey, how can I help? What does Hedda need from Atle to make progress from this meeting until the next? Based on the call, Hedda needs you to send her the logos so she can design the customization options for the feedback widget she presented. There's a proposal to create a new meeting action item for you to follow up and send those over. Great.
Yeah, so you can, and it can also like search, it can pull up information into the meeting, it can generate information, it's cool. But as we said, okay, what if our entire company is running on this thing and this LLM, we can't trust it? So we think that one of the reasons why Claude Code works for developers is because two things. We have version control. So I can start up as many branches as I want. I can do all kinds of crazy work. I can let it work overnight. At the end, again, I'm the one who knows exactly what was changed, and I'm the one who approves it. And the other thing is the harness that we build around to say we have linters, we have automated tests, we have TypeScript. We have all these things that makes it easier for the agent to either do the right thing up front or to iterate and get feedback automatically. So what does that look like in a workplace? For example, very simple, imagine that I'm talking to the AI and somehow, and this could be a meeting where you're just joking around. You're like, yeah, sure, let's give everyone 10 weeks vacation. Like, have now updated your company-wide HR policy, right? I mean, these things can actually happen, right? In this case, this is just the text chat. But if I say, hey, change the vacation policy to 10 weeks, it says, okay, here's a change proposal. Here's a diff. Here's a PR. Of course, we don't use those words. But in practice, if you click on this thing, you see a diff. And then you can even iterate on the diff. So here, initially, this said 10 weeks, and then it said something about Australia. Oh, I think this is just testing, right? Yeah, cool. Immediate danger. Awesome. I'm glad we didn't have to leave the room. Yes, I can even iterate on this proposal. As I asked it to change something, it's changed it. And when I'm happy with it, I update. So again, I am the manager. I'm the person who takes responsibility. I'm the one making the change. The AI is helping me. It could be updating 20 documents, not just one. And everything's tracked, right? So that's the other thing about Git. It's not just that you can work on a branch, that you can get a diff. You have a change history. You say, hey, here's a long document. Who made that little change? Who said that we have 10 weeks vacation? Oh, that was decided in this meeting. Olav signed off on it. So that's all I'm going to say about Tana. You can check it out if you're interested. But anyway, what I'm hoping to convey here is this power of scratching your itch, building a better environment. And then I guess what Tana could be an example of is building a safe ground where everyone else can build. So I have some really, these are all real cases, right? I have a friend who's a teacher in Oslo, and they have a lot of students with different disabilities or legally required aid and all these things. And they have these tools that are built by some software company to track this. And it's a nightmare. The UI, it's just not functioning the way they want it to work. So he has never programmed in his life. He spends a week over Easter, and he has an app that just runs on the local intranet on the school that has just works the way the teachers work, the workflow. When they come into a classroom, they see the pictures, it's color coded, they can, it's perfect, right? And they're so happy with it. And when they're like, hey, could you do this? It's like, yeah, tonight I'll fix it. And tomorrow it's fixed. Of course, we get a little bit nervous because we're like, is that really safe and secure and stuff like that? I mean, if it's running on one laptop, it's probably fine. But again, why couldn't we have a platform for all the schools in Norway where you have someone taking care of the FADA, common login, you have the security, you have the ACL, you know that if you're the teacher in this school, then you have access to data of these students. If you're the student, you have access to your own data. You have APIs, and then anyone could vibe, this teacher can vibe code, the parent can vibe code, the students in high school can vibe code, apps that live on top of that, whether it's language learning apps or whatever, that store their data securely, where the data is accessible to the people who are supposed to have access, right? And everyone can just, I think, I'm not a computer scientist, but I think something like that is possible in different industries, right? I have some of the engineers I've had workshops with, when they were asked to vibe code for a day, anything they wanted, I had two different ones who had children with medical conditions. And they, they're not naive. They're not saying we're not going to go to the doctor. They've been to doctors for years. They know a lot about their children. And so they say, hey, Claude, I know my kid, he's exactly this behavioral pattern. And the thing that would help him, I think, is actually this. Can we build it for him? And can we iterate with him on it, right? That's insane to give people that power if it's responsible. So I'm going to end it here. But I hope that you have some positive energy to go out and build that ridiculous tool you've been wishing that existed, whether it's VR tracking of your garden growing season or whatever. Solve a problem nobody would pay you to solve, and try out some new technologies to get there. And then over time, maybe think about how that could help you in your work. So all of the resources I've talked about, my side projects, the skills, everything is on this URL. Thank you very much.